Hello, you're very welcome back to the weekend football podcast from Matchbook. I'm your host, Daniel Hussey, joined as always by Adrian Clarke and Mark O'Haire. And there's no better place to start, Mark, with a sensational week across insights and your podcast. And I know you hate this kind of stuff. 8 wins, 1 push, and 1 loss. Are my figures correct, Mark? That has to be up there with your best week on Matchbook.
Yeah, that definitely up there for sure. Delighted with a great response. It's always nice when you put the work in and you get that kind of payback at the end of the weekend too. So, very pleased. I hate it because it almost puts more pressure on for the next week. And also we know in this business that there's swings and roundabouts. So, we're on a high right now, but easily could be handing a big low this weekend. But fingers crossed we can ride it out and continue the good form, because I think between Adrian and I, we've had a terrific start in week 1 or week 2 of the Premier League and beyond. So fingers crossed we can keep plugging away and filling people's pockets.
Yeah, sounds good to me, Mark. And shout out to 7.8 Montpellier and both teams to score. Yes, your best long shot landing. Adrian, it was a quieter week from you last week, but you still landed the best podcast bets, making it 4-0 for the podcast bets so far this season. So pressure's still on you guys, big time. It's ramping up every week, Adrian.
It's going all right at the moment. No, pleased with how it's going. I was chuffed with the Crew. It's not a glamour game, but Crew Walsall, I gave that the big up about how they couldn't defend, how I was confident that they'd both score and concede, and for it to finish 2-2 was, a little fist pump. Yeah, I didn't get too excited, but I was pleased.
Yeah, no, sounds good, guys. And the guys seemingly in good form here this morning. So let's take a look at the 4 games. Before we get going, if you are new to the YouTube channel, do hit that like button. Subscribe for free. Takes you 2 seconds. Gets our content out to a wider audience, which is why we're doing this thing. And the second thing on the podcast, do leave a 5-star review. We much appreciate that. Let's get straight into it. We're going to go in race card order in football terms and start with Bournemouth versus Tottenham Hotspur and take a look at the betting that we currently have on matchbook.com. You can back Bournemouth 3.95 in the early game. Tottenham Hotspur available even money 2.0. The draws available at 4.0. Both teams to score, yes. Heavily favoured in this market at 1.58. No, incidentally, is 2.5. And the Asian handicap line marginally favouring Spurs on the Asian handicap line minus half a goal at 1.94. And the goal line here is 2.5 shaded towards the over. So, look, Mark, you'll kick us off after a good week last week. This was a tricky game, I guess, for you to maybe find a goals angle to attack it. But you have to be impressed with Ange Postecoglou and his Tottenham team, particularly in that second half against Manchester United.
Yeah, especially that second half, because first half they were under the pump for a large part of that, and United had a reasonable argument to suggest they could have got something out of that game, considering how they started it. But Spurs definitely grew into it. There's a massive feel-good factor now around the place after the start of the season, and that's purely just around the sort of stylistic changes and the improvements that Postecoglou's made. I've been a big fan of his for a long time now, and it's his character which kind of draws you in, really. And quite rightly, he's getting plenty of praise and support for what he's done in such a short space of time, and most notably the improvements from players who are probably discarded by previous regimes. And Bissouma has now kind of managed 2 man of the match awards in succession. Only Rodri and Lewis Dunk have attempted more passes than Bissouma. He made 7 tackles against Man United, showing his defensive qualities and his all-round ability as well, because he's attempted more ball carries, I should say, than any player in the division over the first 2 games. So, quite the statement really from a player who was nowhere to be seen under Antonio Conte. You've got the goalkeeper Vicario coming in, having a good game against United. The fullbacks Sarr as well, and even Christian Romero has displayed an element of maturity. I guess that's perhaps stemming from being given a bit of a leadership role and responsibility by Postecoglou. So he may have seen something there and decided to kind of act upon it. So I guess there are negatives. They are still giving up plenty of opportunities. Richarlison was pretty ineffective again, leading the line. So I do like both sides here in terms of the direction of travel they're both aiming to take. I think both teams will improve week on week. We've already seen sort of ideals and principles that both managers are looking to try and employ. From a Tottenham perspective, around even money away from home, it still does give me the jitters a little bit. We've seen against both Brentford and Manchester United that they can be put under pressure. They aren't still the finished article, especially defensively. But for Bournemouth, I expected Bournemouth to be good fun this season. We didn't see a huge amount of what there could be about against West Ham, but I think we saw much more of the Iraola way. At Anfield, they pressed high, they played with real intensity and went for Liverpool really early on in that game, and it could have paid off more than it did. They had a 1-goal lead. It could have been doubled. Liverpool fairly fortunate to have 10 men on the field as well at that point. Obviously, the McAllister incident comes later on, but they played a bit more direct, moved the ball forward much quicker, kind of chalk and cheese really compared to the West Ham game. So the issue is really Bournemouth just give you too many chances, just like Spurs really. They faced the most shots in the league last year by quite a distance. They're already topping that metric again, 42 shots faced. Now, Tyler Adams, I think, is a really smart pickup, but he may stem the bleeding a little bit. But for now, I'm quite happy to sort of leave them alone as well while they're a work in progress. So goals were the obvious solution here. And how to play that goal market. I've gone over 2.5 goals in BTTS at 183. I think that's a really nice price, actually. Bournemouth's openers have averaged 3.4 expected goals and 20 shots inside the penalty area. Tottenham's 2 games, 3.65 XG per game, 25 shots in the box. BTTS landing in 3 of the 4 combined matches. It really should have been 4 from 4, considering United's chances, the woodwork, and the penalty appeal, which wasn't given. So, yeah, expecting both teams to oblige here, and then you're just looking for a third goal to land the bounty. So I think that's the way to play it for me.
Okay, over 2.5 goals and both teams to score for Mark O'Haire, 1.83, the bet selection for Bournemouth versus Tottenham Hotspur. Maybe, Adrian, on this game, pick up a little bit on what Mark said about Bournemouth. I watched that game at Anfield. For that first 15, 20 minutes, they had Liverpool on the ropes. They had a couple of chances to perhaps go 2-0 up. So there is an attacking flair from Bournemouth, and you're sort of looking at that angle with goals at least in this game.
Definitely, yeah. It does scream goals, this match. It really does. Iraola will get them pressing better. I think we've seen that. They're really quite bold. They'll win the ball in good areas and create chances. That's how the goal at Anfield came about, of course, from a pretty high turnover. And they will look to do that week in, week out. There is an issue with Solanke. I think he's of interest, isn't he? I think it's West Ham that are really in for him at the moment. Certainly, he could be on the move. That's a concern. And at the back, or as a collective, without the ball, they are still shipping way too many chances. I mean, Liverpool with 10 men still racked up way over 20 shots, which is remarkable, really. And it's a worry, I would guess, for Cherries fans to a degree. So there is going to be pressure on them to keep on scoring goals. Look, I like Mark's bet. I'll happily switch my bet because I wasn't entirely sure that this was available. But I wanted a goals angle. I wanted both teams to score. On its own, it's too skinny. If you pair it with over 2.5, I think that's a very good way of doing it. I had paired it with Tottenham and both teams to score, because if I was to pick a winner, I would side with Spurs based on what I've seen so far. I think the feel-good factor, I saw it last year across North London with Arsenal. It does make a difference. It's quite powerful. When the fans are happy, it makes life much easier for the players and the managers to go out there and express themselves. And I think that Tottenham will do that in the coming weeks. And I think they're going to put in some impressive performances. Look, last season, 2 5-goal thrillers went, one for Spurs in this fixture. And then Bournemouth won the reverse 3-2 at Tottenham. So this fixture has a little bit of history of goals. Tottenham, the thing that puts me off about Tottenham is their away record. Obviously, only 1 clean sheet away from home against the bottom 9 last season. So games like this, they didn't really keep clean sheets that often. They've won just 1 of their last 9 Premier League away matches. And in the first 2 matches, as well as they played on the ball, they gave up over 2 expected goals in both matches. I think they were quite lucky to keep a clean sheet against Manchester United. So, I would side with Spurs because they've got more quality, and I think they can outscore Bournemouth in the game to 2-1, 3-2, 3-1. Any of these score lines. So if you want a bigger price, 3.6, and you do fancy Spurs, this is perhaps the best way in for you. But I think the safer ploy would be to go over 2.5 and both teams to score, because you get so many different scorelines, don't you, on side. So yeah, I think I know which way you're heading with this one, Dan.
Yeah, well, thanks, Adrian. You made my job a lot easier for game week 1. And incidentally, I picked my podcast bets rather well last week. I don't think I had a loser. I think I had 3 wins and a push from your selections, obviously. So shout out to myself as well. I think I need to get an honourable mention. It's not an easy thing. Don't think Sully ever picked the right podcast bets. We will lock in over 2.5 goals and both teams to score. Yes, 1.83. But if you are looking for a fun bet and you want to sit down for the early kickoff, maybe Tottenham to win and both teams to score yes, available at 3.6. Could be a nice price there, as Adrian alluded to. We'll go to the earliest ever relegation 6-pointer in the Premier League. It's 19th versus 20th, 2 teams with 2 defeats from 2 games played. It's Everton versus Wolves, a cracker here at 3 o'clock. Everton 2.42, Wolves are available at 3.35. The draw is 3.4. Both teams to score yes is 1.87. That's favoured in that market versus no. The Asian handicap line sees Wolves get a quarter of a goal head start at 187, and the goal line for this is 2.5, and that's shaded towards the under. So, Adrian, you wanted to speak about this game. I guess in general how big a game it is for both clubs, particularly if one was to lose. But yeah, set up the game for us, because both sides have not been good in front of goal.
It's huge, isn't it? Yeah, you sense that these two will be in the relegation picture, don't you? And look, Everton, pretty diabolical start. Played okay, actually, against Fulham at home on the opening day. Created lots, couldn't score. Obviously, they were diabolical at Villa Park. Wolves played great at Old Trafford, really, really unlucky. And then they get annihilated at home to the Seagulls, don't they? And the way that they defended some of those breakaways was alarming, I think, for Gary O'Neill. When I look at this match from a betting perspective, I can see it from all sides. I really can. I had 3 completely different choices here, and I can easily make a case for all of them. One being Wolves on the handicap, Wolves plus a quarter. Wolves have a good record at Goodison. They've won their last 2 games there. And the way they played at Old Trafford, you'd back them to beat Everton, who don't have a good home record. Cunha in particular has been really influential, and they've had an awful lot of shots and they've got a high XG. So that was one way of looking at it. The other was that both have created loads of chances and both have given up loads of chances at the other end. So then I was looking at both teams to score, similar prices, 1.8, because you can't trust either defence at the moment. But I've landed on unders after all of that, which I think is probably the most obvious play. It's at 1.8 again. The other 2 were 1.88. I picked this one purely on the basis of can either team score 2? Genuinely. I mean, does anyone think that they're going to score 2 goals? It feels so unlikely. And I'll tell you why it feels unlikely, because for Everton, at home, it's happened once in 20 games. Once in 20 games since the start of last season have they scored more than 1 goal. So
that's a shocking statistic, Adrian.
Yeah, but wait for Wolves. They've scored 1 or less in 18 of 20 away games. So, you've got 3 of 40 matches where the teams have scored more than 1. So on the basis of that, you have to go unders. I think it's the obvious play. Now, of course, they might be so bad, of course, at defending that this is the exception to the rule, and they do score 2 or 3 goals, one side or even both. But the stats tell you that this will be low scoring because the finishing is so woeful from both teams. And I do think the fact that it is a 6-pointer will force both managers to be a little bit cagier. They will look to protect and make sure they don't get beaten by a team that's likely to be in and around them come the end of the season. So yeah, that's my take on it. I mean, there's lots more I could go into, but I'll leave some room for Mark. But yeah, that's the reason I've gone for the unders here.
Yeah, Mark, over to you. I saw you chuckling away at the statistics. 3 in the last 40 between Wolves and Everton, home and away games. They've scored 2 goals or more. So that's a startling statistic.
Astonishing. I don't think I'm going to be able to better that stat on this podcast or possibly this season, in fairness. So, I've come at this game with the same selection with similar viewpoints as well. I was tempted by Wolves with a quarter goal start, not so much Everton, but I've landed on a 2.5 goals for different sort of mindset really to Adrian. He's saying, can either team score 2 goals or more? I just think it gives you so much on your side, really. Both teams to score no is around even money, which I assumed Adrian might be hunting. That's normally one of his kind of favourite plays in these kind of games. But I prefer unders just because it gives you that bit more security, a bit more on side. You're kind of guarding against the 0-0, the 1-0, the 2-0, either way, as well as the 1-1. So, I cannot see either team sort of running away with this 3-0. For example, or as Adrian says, scoring twice at all. So with a consolation. So Everton are hurting my head a little bit already this season. At the start of August, I was quite confident about them being a decent shout for relegation But by mid-August, I was starting to wonder whether the nucleus was there for a team who could be more than solid enough to stay up, really, because I think there is a spine there which can be decent if they're available. And that's the issue at the minute is Calvert-Lewin looks like he's going to be missing out again after the whack he took last week. He hasn't played 90 minutes often enough. If he was available against Fulham, they might have got a result out of that game. They didn't. I know Danjuma came off the bench and was lively enough, but ineffective as well. And then you look to your sort of key players of Villa Park, and you've got Keane and Pickford making glaring errors. You've got a 38-year-old left back doing similar. Just a bit of a shambles, really. And the pressure's on, really. For Wolves, much more positive, really, because they were very good at Old Trafford. But the same old issues about finishing applies. And I think the Brighton game looks worse than it really was. They missed a lot of chances again. Some real naivety, as Adrian alluded to, in the second half, and they went chasing a little bit and got done. But if you look at the actual figures, the shot count was 16-all against Brighton. I think it was 12-11 in terms of shots in the box. The XG was almost exactly the same as well. So Wolves are a little bit loose at the minute, conceding goals and opportunities, but they are creating plenty. The issue is who's going to score them, and Cunha's probably the most likely, but you started Fabio Silva last week, who has got 4 goals and 56 Premier League appearances. He's not the answer, so I'm not sure what it is. They've had 39 shots this season. Only Brighton have had more shots in the Premier League, and Wolves scored just once, and that was a consolation when 4-0 down. So Núñez obviously getting that stupid red card that will thwart them going forward. They've lost Ruben Neves, who's a huge influence, especially from dead ball situations. So yeah, big game for week 3. Difficult to see either team obliging by more than just the one goal, as Adrian alludes to. So and unders has landed in 7 of Everton's 10 home games under Dyche as well. So yeah, I thought 1.8 was a big price for a game which looks like it could be quite scrappy. But I guess we just need to be aware with these new directives. We're getting much more football than probably previous campaigns. The goals per game output is increasing because of that. But yeah, hopefully we've got the right side of the line here.
Yeah, I just stat checked that stat, Adrian. Absolutely sensational stat, unbelievable. I just went through Everton's home games last season. It's amazing watching them 1 by 1 not score more than 1 goal. And in Wolves, one of them was away in Goodison, the 2-1, as you said. So yeah, fascinating statistic. We're locking that as a bet under 2.5 goals, 1.8. We'll go to the third game here. Brighton at home to West Ham, Saturday night football. Let's take a look at the betting that we currently have at matchbook.com. You can back Brighton at 1.56, West Ham or 6.2. The draw is available at 4.8. Both teams to score yes is 1.68 with no at 2.3. The Asian handicap line sees West Ham get a goal start at 2.08. And the goal line for this game is 3.5. And that is shaded towards the under. Apologies, 2.5. Shaded a good bit towards, 3.5 shaded towards the under there. So Mark, stick with you on this one. A fascinating game with Brighton in such good form. Can they keep that going? This seems like a routine enough Brighton win to me.
Possibly. I think they are obviously fair favourites. They're very short price favourites as well here, after going 2 from 2. I think they have benefited from playing 2 teams who probably aren't completely ready for the season ahead, still trying to get themselves together, really. They have been really clinical, really ruthless. After only 2 games, they've had 6 different players who have scored goals. 3 different players have created 2 or more goals. 7 different players have taken 3 or more shots. They're also 1st, 5th and 6th highest chance creators play for Brighton, an XG output of 6.24 and 43 shots. You know, it's been incredibly impressive, despite the rotation as well, because last week De Zerbi left Ferguson and João Pedro on the bench, the new signing who scored as well in the previous week. All 3 of those weren't needed really until the game was won. So he brought Billy Gilmour back into central midfield as well. So, I still think there is room though for them to kind of cover over the loss of McAllister and Caicedo. I still think they might be a little bit weak in that area. Going forward, they're exceptional. No side has a better non-penalty expected goals output than Brighton in the Premier League since De Zerbi was appointed, which is astonishing, really. Bettering Manchester City going forward, that kind of gung-ho, sort of pulsating approach is fantastic to follow. But they do leave themselves vulnerable to conceding goals. In 34 league games under De Zerbi, they've only kept 9 clean sheets. 22 of those matches have seen both teams scoring. Those matches averaging 3.5 goals per game. But, I don't want to go on too long, but just in terms of very small samples, of course. But defensively, I do have a slight concerns about them. Luton scored 59 goals in 46 championship games last season. They had 22 touches of the ball in Brighton's penalty area in week 1. Last season, Brighton's opponents had fewer than 22 touches in the box in 27 of their 38 league games. At home to the bottom 3, Brighton only allowed 28 penalty box touches in all 3 games combined, and Luton had 22. And then, as we discussed with the Wolves game, they allowed 16 shots at the Amex, an XG of over 2, 12 shots in the box, allowed 4 big chances to be created. So I think from a West Ham perspective, there are weaknesses in this Brighton team. It's how you can sort of open them up, really. And I think Ward-Prowse's debut for West Ham gives them a lot of hope, not just from set piece deliveries, but also the open play as well. He's a real weapon. We saw the statistic in the game about West Ham's threat from corners and dead ball situations. They scored the joint 4th most goals from corners last season. And we saw against Chelsea, it's going to be an asset for them again. So I think they can hurt them. Ultimately, though, West Ham's away record is why I'm not too hopeful about them, because last season they were demolished here 4-0 by Brighton. They also lost 2-0 at home to the Seagulls. They lost 13 of 19 away last season, 7 of 9 defeats at the top 9. They only scored 4 goals as well at top half teams as well, so that's a concern. But I do think they can oblige in this game. So similar to Adrian in the last match, I had 3 different wagers for this game penned out. Have I picked the right one? I've taken the most pragmatic, as you can probably imagine. I had Brighton and both teams to score at 3.0, which I do think is a big runner at a big price. Huge increase on Brighton just to win, almost double the price there. And Brighton over 2.5 goals is 2.15. But I think for a bit more insurance, I've opted for Brighton and over 1.5 goals at 175. You're basically getting paid out by any scoreline that's not 1-0. And Brighton games don't end 1-0. So I think West Ham can score in this match, but I think Brighton just have too much going forward.
Okay, that's Brighton over 1.5 goals, 1.75, but a couple of other selections as well for Mark that he was thinking about if you are that way inclined. Adrian, just a little bit on the point Mark made about the Luton game. I watched that, and particularly the first half, I couldn't get over how open Brighton were at the back, and if Luton had a bit more quality, they could have taken advantage. Would you have a fear for Brighton's defence going forward? Again, as Mark touched on, again, it is a very small sample size we have this season.
Yeah, based on what I've seen, I would, because they've played weak opponents, haven't they? Let's be honest. Luton will be right near the bottom, and I think Wolves will be too. So, yeah, they probably, but maybe they felt they could afford to play with a little bit more abandon against those teams and effectively outscore them. Play like that against Liverpool or Arsenal or City, you're going to ship 3-4 goals, aren't you? So. Yeah, no, it is mildly alarming, but I think the positives at the moment definitely outweigh the negatives. It's been a really uplifting start for them. And they do like playing West Ham. They've lost none of 12 Premier League games against them. So they're a little bit of a bogey team for the Hammers. So people who believe in all that nonsense and the patterns, that you definitely want to be on Brighton's side. Obviously, individuals are on fire. March, Enciso, Mitoma, fantastic starts to the season from them. As for West Ham, Mark mentioned about the away record, really bad, isn't it? 13 of 19 they lost away from home last season. I wasn't blown away by them against Chelsea either. I think at times, had that penalty gone in, I think they'd have got beaten. It was a mild robbery, really. It's flattered them big time. They didn't have a lot of the ball and offered that much of a threat from where I was sat. So great result, definitely take it, but I didn't think they were brilliant. And away from home, the reason I've gone for my selection, so I fancy Brighton for obvious reasons. West Ham poor away, Brighton on fire. So we're going to go with Brighton, but I'm going to go for under 4.5 to be paired with it. Look at the leap from 1.56 for them just to win the game to go to 2.1 is huge. And I'll tell you why it's huge, because 2 of West Ham's last 40 games since the start of last season have gone over 4.5. So, 38 out of 40 sees this come in, win, lose or draw for West Ham. They're not involved in many crazy games. That's because of Moyes and the pragmatism and whatnot, and also because they don't have that many goal threats themselves, West Ham. So, yeah, I think Brighton will win, but I don't see them tonking West Ham in the way that they did against Luton and Wolves. So, that's my angle.
And any team that can afford to drop Evan Ferguson for a number of games is a proper decent team. So
Every pod, Evan Ferguson gets name checked. I love it.
He's the future £100 million man, potentially going to Arsenal next season if you believe the report. So,
I'd like to believe that report. Yeah, I'll take it.
he is a talent. Look, we don't have many good players, Adrian, and most of them England have taken. So we're happy to have Evan on board here. So
go on, Declan. Yeah,
we'll go for the pragmative selection from Mark O'Haire. Brighton and over 1.5 goals, 1.75. Adrian with the 2.1 selection there with the under 4.5. And if you do want something at a little bit of a bigger price, maybe pair it with both teams to score, yes, at around 3.0 and one of Mark's selections there too. So we'll go to probably the game of the weekend here, Newcastle at home to Liverpool. People have strong opinions on this game already, but we'll take a look at the betting that we have on matchbook.com. And Newcastle, heavy favourites here, 2.24. Liverpool, 3.15. And the draw is available at 4.0. Both teams to score, yes, is available at a whopping 1.5. It nearly looks like a misprint there on the screen. 1-2 in all money turns. Asian handicap line sees Liverpool get a quarter of a goal head start at 1.98. And the goal line, again, is a high one here at 3.5. Shaded a good bit towards the under, though. So, Adrian, over to you on this one. Newcastle back at home. I got the sense, watching the game against Manchester City, that there was a big opportunity for Newcastle that they didn't quite take, as harsh as that sounds, because it is at the Etihad. There was definitely a missed opportunity, but I guess it shows how strongly and how big we think this Newcastle team is right now, and how they could potentially be challenging for a title, if not top 4 this season.
Yeah, it's a funny one, isn't it? Because as brilliant as they were against Aston Villa, and they were brilliant in that match, they did disappoint at the Etihad Stadium. They didn't really lay a glove on Man City, who I think were there for the taking with injuries and the Super Cup and the travel, etc. So, yeah, but that was the pattern last year, wasn't it? It's Newcastle smash most teams at home. They're very good against the weaker sides on the road, but get them against the better teams away from St James's, and they go into their shell a little bit. So many blanks. Just look at their record last season away to the big boys. So many zeros in the goals scored tally. So that's the next challenge for them. If they want to finish top 4 this season, if they want to be challengers, they've got to be a little bit more confident and adventurous away from home and offer that threat. So, but they don't need to worry about that so much here. It's at St James's Park. You know the atmosphere is going to be rocking. And I just think that stylistically, or from a tactical point of view, Newcastle are terrible opponents for Liverpool. Really are. Newcastle fast starts. We know that they love at St James's to tear into the opposition. And once they get in front there, they almost always win. And Liverpool, I think one of the weak spots for them across the last season and a bit has been slow starts, conceding the first goal, particularly on the road. I think that since the start of last season, 9 times on the road, they've conceded the first goal. They've won 1. They've lost 7. So they're not great at playing catch up when they're behind. There's a fragility there. And the way Liverpool started this season, with a very bold starting 11, basically with 2 defenders, Van Dijk and Konate. The rest, obviously, 2 attacking fullbacks, 3 midfielders that all want to go forward, and a front 3. It lends itself to excitement. But I think up against Newcastle at St James's with that strong midfield 3 of Tonali, Joelinton and Bruno Guimaraes, and the pace of Isak running in beyond, the pace out wide of Gordon and Almiron, if Arnold's going to come inside or Robertson's going to fly forward. I just think they've got a lot of ways they can hurt Liverpool in this match. Now, Liverpool won the game last year. I remember watching this game. They won it, but Pope had been sent off. And I think even against 10 men of Newcastle, Liverpool were hanging on a little bit. I just think Newcastle, if they bring anything like their A game, will create a lot of chances against Liverpool. And it could be who scores most. And I would back Newcastle's defence to limit a very good Liverpool attack enough to get the 3 points. I'm just going to go for Newcastle on the nose here. Not going to mess around. I just think the price, although not massive, represents a bit of value. When I look at the game tactically, I think Newcastle are the kind of opponents Jurgen Klopp's team in the here and now don't want to face. They might bring in Endo. I would if I was Jurgen Klopp, but whether that's enough to stop the force of the Magpies remains to be seen.
Okay, on the nose, as Adrian says, Newcastle 2.24. Mark, you're on similar lines here. Before we get into your selection, I want to speak a little bit about market moves. And there was 4 or 5 big market moves on teams over the weekend, and one of them was Newcastle. A lot of late money on the match with betting exchange. I think when we previewed on a Wednesday, Newcastle around a 5.9, 6.0 shot. On the nose, this is, and then they went off something like 4.5, even a little bit shorter before they pushed out before the off. Is this more regular early season and just the market sort of getting a grips of teams, or is this something we expect to see throughout the season?
I think it's early season volatility, really, especially with team selections where it's still quite hard to get a real handle on starting 11s, tactical approaches, formations at this stage. You can watch all the preseason games you like, really, but come the first game, there's always a couple of surprises chucked in there. On Newcastle specifically, we kind of outlined it on the show last week because we spoke on the Wednesday, even before the Super Cup, and said, this could be the best time to play Man City all season. Early on, fresh off, a trip back from Athens, a Saturday night game, Newcastle with the full week, no injuries to worry about. And City with plenty of those issues too. But, we also kind of alluded to on the show that the move was, if it went any further, City suddenly become a decent value bet. And that was the case actually on Saturday night. City were going off really attractive prices. And when you saw the actual team sheet, sure, there was 3 centre-halves in the back 4, but still a bloody good team. And I think the way in which they dispatched Newcastle, without any fuss really, was quite scary really for the rest of the league. If that's what they can do when they're really up against it, then are we really going to have a title race this season? I'm not even sure, to be honest. I thought that was going to be the opportunity for a City slip up. But I don't think it was anything massively Newcastle based. Obviously, they are sort of well rated because they had such a good season last year, not just in terms of league position, but the underlying metrics even showed how strong they were. But that did tail off a little bit after January, and that's something I'm going to sort of pick up on in this match, because I was really disappointed actually with their effort at the Etihad. They fired off very few efforts of real note. Looked really just incapable of making an impression or any inroads in that match. And you don't want to overreact to one game because it was Man City away, but. It would be a concern in terms of what they're doing defensively. Start of last season, they were so strong up until the end of January. They conceded just 11 goals in their first 20 league games. They kept 12 clean sheets. It was the best defence in the division by a distance. Since then, they've played 21 games across all competitions and kept 2 clean sheets. Even against Aston Villa, they allowed 12 shots in the penalty area and an XG of 1.77. So that is something I'm keeping an eye on from a Newcastle perspective. We still believe them to be this really tight, solid unit, but certainly since the end of January, it suggests that they might be unravelling a little bit defensively and giving teams an opportunity or two. And, that would be a concern when playing a side like Liverpool, who, we know are going to attack. But like Adrian says, I need Endo in that midfield before I get excited about this Liverpool team, because it's just far too gung-ho. McAllister being available is a huge plus. The issue with Liverpool is obviously the same. Defensively, they've fallen short. Second half against Chelsea, they were put under the pump. Bournemouth, as we've already talked about, created plenty in the first half. Alisson, Van Dijk, Trent, sort of mainstays of that Liverpool defensive line, all looked really uncomfortable at times and forced into mistakes. And Newcastle, as Adrian alludes, start strongly and will put you under pressure in that first half hour. So Liverpool have faced 9 shots on target across their first 2 games. I expect that number to increase. Goals would have been my preferred option here, but the lines are really, really high. Overs at 151, BTTS 148, too high if anything. It almost kind of brings in opposing goals as a value shot there. But I'll leave that alone just because Liverpool could field any sort of team at the minute. It's not a strong play, but I'm going to be slightly more pragmatic to Adrian and just take the -quarter goal start on Newcastle at 195, which is still a decent-ish price. The market is saying that right now Newcastle are very, very slightly the better team of the 2, which I think is probably fair considering how settled that team is playing at St James's Park, and Liverpool stylistically and individually do have the quality to hurt them, but they are a work in progress. They are in transition. That midfield is still a long way from being anywhere close to being a unit that's capable of matching a Newcastle side, as we saw against Villa, can steamroller you if you turn up and you aren't ready for that challenge. So I think taking the -quarter goal start just gives that slight insurance against the draw. If the game ends in a draw, we only lose half of our stake. The other half is returned as a push. If Newcastle win, we're obviously paid out at 195, but it's not one of my strongest plays. This might be a watching brief for me.
Okay, Newcastle -quarter the selection for Mark O'Haire. The selection of the podcast, we will go with Adrian on the nose, 2.24. How often do we get to go on the nose here, Adrian? So Newcastle locking it in. It's amazing how short they are versus this Liverpool team. It just shows you how far they've come. And incidentally, some of those other market moves, Crystal Palace against Arsenal, money for West Ham, I think, against Chelsea, Everton as well. So do keep an eye on the matchbook betting exchange, as I said, particularly when that team selection comes in, as Mark alluded to. The volatility of those markets is insane. So you might pick up a value play that might be the complete opposite of what the guys said, but it's in line with what they're thinking as well on Wednesday night. So that's when we're recording this. Wednesday lunchtime. We'll go to our EFL bets. Incidentally, if you want a recap of all those bets, insights.matchbook.com, the place to get it from Wednesday evening. Over to Adrian. You had a winner, as you touched on, Crewe versus Walsall, came in at halftime. You've got two selections here. It starts with Coventry versus Sunderland.
Yeah, should be a good game, this. Yeah, two teams that were in the playoffs at the end of last season. It wasn't to be for them, but they'll be there or thereabouts again, I'm sure, certainly in the case of Coventry. Sunderland, every game so far has been fairly entertaining. They've all gone over 2.5. Tony Mowbray is building a really young, vibrant, attack-minded side at the Stadium of Light. They don't give them many clean sheets, none yet. Every game has seen both teams score. And both teams to score here is pretty skinny, which is why I've moved away from that. They've got a guy called Luke O'Nien, who's really a midfielder, utility guy. He's playing centre-back at the moment. I just think that's not ideal, especially against the Coventry team. There's got Haji Wright, the US international, banging form, record signing. He's hit the ground running, looks like Gyökeres, basically, in terms of his style. He's very quick and powerful, athletic guy. And I think he can cause Sunderland problems. But look, Sunderland almost always score. They're really good going forward. They've actually scored in 43 of their 51 championship matches since the start of last season, which is pretty good going. I think you'd agree. So Sunderland are almost always worth a goal. Coventry, for what it's worth, at home, almost always score as well. They've notched in 20 of their last 25 at the CBS Arena. So look, based on that, we've already got ourselves 2 goals. Maybe we just need one more from either side for this bet to land. Look, Coventry beat Middlesbrough 3-0 in their first home game. I can see them scoring 2 or 3 here in this one as well. So I'd side with Cov, but I think that either way, we should see at least 3 goals in the fixture.
Okay, over 2.5 goals, Coventry versus Sunderland, locked in for Adrian at 1.79. Your second selection comes from League One, Adrian. As someone who has Bolton, me personally, that is, back to anti-post, I've been keeping a proper close eye on League One, and obviously insane result there against Wigan. We won't get into that with the expected goals. But on Peterborough versus Derby were probably, I think they were the favourites for League One, or everyone's favourites, I guess. Slow enough starting. Peterborough 3 wins out of 3 before the defeat last week, and you actually think they're a value play here to beat Derby of the week?
I think it's a really good price. I do. It's what stands out. Peterborough at home are strong. They've always been strong, and particularly under Darren Ferguson at League One level, there's not many teams that get the better of Posh at London Road. They won this fixture 2-0 towards the back end of last season as well. The reason I'm going against Derby, and Derby were I think they were my pick actually for League One. There's a bit of a crisis going on there at the moment. I don't know what's going on with the ownership. They're not giving Paul Warren funds to go out and bring in the players he needs, not yet anyway. And they've now suffered 3 big injuries. Max Bird, key player for them in midfield, he's out. And both wing backs, Kane Wilson and Joel Ward, who used to be at Peterborough, they're all out for at least 3 months. So they are kind of down to the bare bones for this fixture. And I saw Peterborough in the flesh the other week at Barnsley, and their strength is wide. So I'm thinking, well, you've lost your first choice fullbacks. You've got Ephraim Mason-Clark on one side, Kwame Poku on the other. Options as well, Ricky J. Jones off the bench. And I'm thinking Peterborough will absolutely attack them down the sides. And I think they can hurt them. In a way, this is kind of a young v old game. Peterborough are young. They've got loads of players that are sort of 22 or under, that are quick and athletic. Derby are a bit aging. They're quite slow, sluggish, loads of experience, but not a lot of pace. So I just think, based on what we've seen so far this season, Peterborough are absolute worthy favourites, and they should be a shorter price. It's just because it's Derby that they're up against, the name Derby, that they're at this price. And obviously, Posh lost at Northampton unexpectedly last Saturday, so I'm thinking there'll be a reaction. Surely there'll be a reaction. So yeah, I'm feeling Peterborough here, especially at 2.6.
Okay, big price on Peterborough, very close to promotion last year, 4-0 up against Sheffield Wednesday and blew it. Will be thereabouts at the end of the season, so will Derby perhaps, but Peterborough 2.6 is selection for Adrian Clarke. There will be an EFL selection in the long shots section for Mark O'Haire, which is very exciting, but we will start with Norway, Mark, in your European section, and you just seem to have a grasp on the Norwegian league. I think it's the best way of putting it.
I love the Norwegian league. Obviously, it runs through the summer when everyone else is having a break. It's normally very high scoring as well. And anyone who's read my insights column through the summer will know I've been quite keen on Tromsø. Very keen to board that bus again this weekend. They're punching massively above their weight. Sitting third in the Eliteserien, overachieved last season just to finish in the top half. So defying expectations yet again, pushing the boundaries even further. They're only 5 points off the top with a game in hand, which is really quite astonishing. Really, 3 defeats in 18, one of which arrived in stoppage time. All 3 of their losses have arrived by just 1 goal margins. They come into this match 4 wins on the spin. That includes winning away at Bodo Glimt, and they're also comfortably sitting off Brann at home, a very decent Brann team. They have, by quite some distance as well, the best defence in the division. Only 3 sides have scored 2 goals or more against them in 18. They've kept 7 clean sheets, and at the opposite end, they've scored in 15 of 18. So they often get on the score sheet and they almost never concede 2 goals or more. So they're very difficult to beat in that sense. And that's why I think the 195 on Tromsø with a half-goal start away at Sarpsborg on Saturday is really, really nice, actually. It's a really nice line because their away record is remarkable. 6 wins from 8, just the 1 defeat. They've kept 4 clean sheets in those 8 away days. They've only failed to score once. And if they net away at Sarpsborg, I think they'll be very tough to beat. Sarpsborg, a mid-table team, they're quite erratic. What I'd like to describe them as is kind of lively, but loose as well. They come into this match having won twice, but lost 5 times in the last 7. 3 of their 4 home wins this season have come against the bottom 5. And when facing stronger sides at home, they've won once, drawn once, and lost 4 times, conceding 2 goals or more in 4 of those 6 games as well. And they've only managed 2 clean sheets since April. They do offer a lot going forward, and that is the danger. But, against a side as rock solid as Tromsø, they should be capable of keeping them at arm's length. They beat them 2-1 at home in June. I wouldn't be too surprised to see them escape from Sarpsborg with at least a share of the spoils. So, almost evens on them with a half-goal start at Sarpsborg. Really stands out.
Okay, Tromsø plus half a goal on the Asian handicap line on the Matchbook Betting Exchange, currently available at 1.95. The selection of Mark O'Haire. Interesting to see if that market moves before the weekend. We're going to go to our long shot section. Before I get the guys' tips, shout out to Adrian week 1 for getting us Fulham and both teams, Fulham and under 2.5 goals from memory. And then the second one was Montpellier and both teams to score yes last week from Mark O'Haire. So if we keep at this rate, guys, there's going to be some serious money to be made. A £20 stake on all selections so far this season would have left you up plus £226.56 on the Matchup Betting Exchange, including your 2% commission. So that's not a bad rate to get going. No pressure, Mark O'Haire, to start off here. Swindon versus Crawley, and you're siding Crawley here with the both teams to score yes angle, which is a pretty big price.
Yeah, 6-1, 7.0. Crawley were relegation favourites at the start of the season. They've made a really positive start, defying those predictions of doom. They were, or still are, really a bit of a laughing stock off the field. Let go the majority of their sort of big hitters as well. Some really baffling decisions behind the scenes, but just huge credit to Scott Lindsay for garnering some decent performances out of those players, because they've taken 7 points from 4 games. Probably could and should have been more, actually, because last weekend they were beaten 1-0 at Gillingham. Dom Telford missed a penalty. Crawley actually won the shot count 17-7. The shots on target count 7-2. On another day, they take at least a point, if not more, from a very well-fancied Gillingham side. So before that, they've already turned over MK Dons and Bradford, admittedly both on home soil, but 2 of the promotion favourites alongside Gillingham at the start of the season. And they've been really solid as well. The 3rd best expected goals against record, and the 3rd fewest shots faced across the first 4 rounds of fixtures. And, they will come under fire from Swindon, who obviously are fresh from that 5-5 draw with Wrexham, but they led 5-3 going into stoppage time and still failed to win. I wonder if that might have an impact psychologically on this Swindon side. But in truth, the 5-5 was quite kind, actually, for Swindon. Ben Foster retired after the game because, such was the standard of his goalkeeping. Wrexham absolutely battered them by all accounts, really. But for Swindon, really, goals have just been completely rife. They've scored twice or more in all 3 of their games. They've already conceded 8 goals too. The 3 games have averaged 4.2 expected goals. Nobody is facing a higher XG average. No one's allowed more shots per game, shots on target per game. Yet Swindon are still odds on here. They played a game fewer than everyone else, but maybe they might be a week behind. I'm not sure, but I just take offence really at that price. I don't think that the market's kind of catching up with pre-season prices to what we've actually seen so far. And the signs with Crawley are quite encouraging. And I think this is also a bit of a revenge spot for their head coach, Scott Lindsay, who was Swindon's manager, then left to take over Crawley last season. He was the assistant there before taking the number 1 role, and he kind of had a bit of a parting shot or a bit of a moan really about the Swindon fans, who he felt never gave him the support he probably deserved, and he wasn't the big name that they craved. Really had a few parting shots last May, really. So he'll be bang up for this, a return to the county ground. So I think Crawley are underrated in this match. They're around 3s to win it, but you can push the price up to 6-1 by including BTTS, as Swindon matches have been quite chaotic.
Okay, if you want to play it safe, take the 90-minute market. But if you do want that long shot, as Mark alluded to, he has taken offence to Crawley's price and both teams to score 7.0. Adrian, over to you on this one. Aston Villa fans finally back in Europe, to be drawn away to Hibernian today at 5:45 is probably as bleak as it's going to get for a European trip. But I'm sure this has a little bit of your thinking ahead of their game against Burnley on.
Yeah, you know me too well. But it's not just about the fact that they've got this game, which is going to take up a lot of their attention in midweek against Hibs. It's, Burnley have had a lot of prep time for this game. So I'm looking at Burnley to defy the odds and potentially beat Aston Villa and maybe do it with a clean sheet. A little bit like Mark, I think that they've been undervalued in the market. Aston Villa are 2.2 favourites to win at Turf Moor. For me, that's way too short. They were unbelievable last season. I know it was the Championship, but at home, just staggering, really. Just 1 defeat all season. Conceded 15 goals in 23 home games. They're capable of controlling this match and keeping Aston Villa at arm's length for long periods. Villa obviously have got Watkins and Diaby, who are excellent players, but they have been hit hard by injuries. I think that Ramsey's out at the moment, Buendia's out long term. At the back they've lost Mings, so I think they're suffering a little bit. Even though they had a terrific result against Everton at home, they look fragile for me at St James's. They looked in midfield worryingly off the pace. I would say that the midfield unit of Camara and Douglas Luiz against quality opposition away from home, not good enough in terms of their off the ball work. So I think Burnley can give them a game here. I genuinely do. And they've only played that 1 game against Manchester City. They've had a long break because the match against Luton was postponed. So plenty of time to come up with a game plan, to get up to speed. And I think that Vincent Kompany will have been focusing on this match for a while. Unai Emery he's not going to have much time to think about it because it's all about Hibs. We know how much stock he puts on European football. He will be desperate to go through to the knockout, to the group stage of the Conference League, and for him that will be the priority in the here and now. So yeah, for me, Burnley and BTTS basically to win to 0 at 7.2 is a cheeky little long shot.
Okay, yeah, 2 brilliant cases for the long shot section again. So let's see how they get on. We will move on to podcast best bets, which I've alluded to already is 4-0 for the season. That will be up plus £72 and £13 based on that £20 stake, 2% commission on the matchbook betting exchange. And Adrian, we'll stick to you because, to be honest, this price is a little bit bigger than I thought it would be. So I think that's a good sign. And so take it away on Manchester City and both teams to score now.
Well, that's why I picked it. Yeah, I didn't think it'd be backable. I mean, is there anyone out there that thinks Manchester City won't go to Bramwell Lane and win? I'd be surprised if you find too many people that that would expect a slip up here against Sheffield United. It feels like a golfing class. They were better probably at the City Ground for half an hour at least. Sheffield United, Gus Harmer, the new signing, come up with a great goal, but they were second best for long periods to Forest. The Palace had 24 shots on the opening day at Bramall Lane. They've had 24. How many are Man City going to rack up in this game? It's quite scary to think, really. I'm going to pair it with a clean sheet. I do think City are so much better at the back now than they were. That's why we're seeing less of these slip-ups, because he's bought really good defenders and he's putting quite a lot of defensive players in his starting 11. Pep Guardiola, who'll miss this game, by the way. I'm sure you saw the news, but he's got a bad back, so he's going to miss the next couple of games. So that's not ideal, but I'm sure they'll be well prepped for it. Just looking at City so far, 0.29 XG against Newcastle, against Burnley, 0.33 XG against. They faced one shot on target in each of those games. Now, Sheffield United is an easier fixture than both of those games. I think the Blades are going to find it hard to get many shots on target. And if they don't get many shots on target, they won't score. So, for all of those reasons, I think Man City to win to 0 stands out, really. I was just surprised to get it at a backable price.
178 currently. Manchester City, both teams to score no. The best bet for Adrian Clarke. And over to you, Mark. Regular readers of your Insights column would have not just Norwegian talent, but also Brazilian leagues have been rather fruitful for you this season. So take it away. This is a best bet for the weekend. So this is an interesting show.
Well, I did quite like Man City to win to 0, but someone
Oh, wow.
first.
Really? Okay.
Yeah,
there you go,
Adrian. Was on my hit list for sure. Go to Brazil then this weekend. Botafogo are running away with the Brazilian title. They have an 11-point lead after just 20 matches. They've won 15 of those, but it's their home record which is really kind of standing out, which is incredible, really. 10 games at home in Rio at the Maracanã. They've won all 10 of them. I'm expecting that streak to extend to this weekend when they play Bahia. Now, they are missing their top goal scorer, Tiquinho Suarez. He's been missing for the last couple of weeks as well. We're missing for another couple of weeks still, but they've still managed to garner some good results. They're also involved in Copa Libertadores action either side of this match, which may take a degree of preference, really. But otherwise, it's just all positive, really. Botafogo unbeaten in 17 across all competitions, and their defensive record in Rio is exceptional. They've only allowed 3 goals in those 10 home league wins. They've also beaten Bahia 2-1 away this season already. Bahia are just above the drop zone. They're very Jekyll and Hyde, highlighted really by their 4-0 win at home to Bragantino last weekend, which was very impressive. The home form has been their saving grace, because on the road they've been pretty rank, 6 defeats in 10. Their only away win came at fellow strugglers Vasco, and that came behind closed doors as well. They've scored just 4 goals in 10 away days, despite not yet travelling to a team inside the top 3. So you kind of marry that up with Botafogo's defensive record. Doesn't look pretty. Not just that, they've conceded 2 goals or more in half of their away days. They've lost all 3 trips to the top 7, conceding twice or more in each. And they've actually failed to score in 4 of 6 across all venues, I should say, recently as well. So they have been blanking a lot regularly. So the price on Botafogo was around 1.8. It's already been clipped in quite significantly, but you can just chuck in under 4.5 goals and get it up to near almost even. So 195. Combine the two teams' 20 league games. We've had just 2 occasions when the over 4.5 goal line has landed. So 38 of the 40 games combined have seen under 4.5 goals. So I'm quite happy to pair it alongside Botafogo to win. They should get the result. Wouldn't be too surprised if they kept a clean sheet along the way. But I think under 4.5 goals just gives us a bit more sort of margin for error.
Okay, Botafogo under 4.5 goals, close to even money, 1.95 currently on Matchbook. My thanks to Mark O'Haire and Adrian Clarke. There was a comment there, Mark, before we go. Lively but loose, like you said earlier. Sounds like Mark O'Haire out on the tiles on a Saturday night. So there you go. The YouTube commenters, thank you as always. There's a lot of commenters. Lively but loose. You had some good lines today, Mark. Lively but loose. You've taken offense on certain prices, but no, guys, really good show. Really appreciate your time as always. Insights.matchbook.com. Great chance to recap all the podcast bets, that'll be available on Wednesday afternoon. And do hit that like button if you haven't already on YouTube. It may be much appreciated and gets our content out to a wider audience. Do check out the Match with Betting Exchange over the weekend, and we've had a few questions on those market moves. Do keep an eye on those market moves on the Betting Exchange as well. Until then, we'll chat to you same time, same place next week, please God. Until then, enjoy the weekend, please gamble responsibly, and we'll chat to you then. Bye-bye.